guys are getting feedback from us at all. The only time I know I do something wrong is when they write me a citation, because they're not very forthcoming. Now, we elected you. We can do something about it if we don't like the way you do anything. These guys aren't elected. They're making laws that cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines and basically have no oversight. Why don't we, not individually, I'm not talking about we make a law that says, why don't we have congressional oversight on all they do, not just when somebody has a complaint?
You do theoretically have it, and you have it through Congress, through the House and the Senate. In addition to our authority to make laws, we also have oversight responsibilities to make sure that the funds we appropriate are being spent and the policies that we make are being implemented in the way that the Congress intended for them to be implemented. Now, if we fail to do that oversight, that's where you're supposed to hold us accountable. So if OSHA is on your back, you need to let your congressman know about that particular case. And your congressman, if he or she is worth their salt, is going to try to intercede in your behalf. You know, I've had any number of OSHA complaints that have been brought to my attention by employers in my district. They've had OSHA inspectors to come in and to cite them for something that was minuscule. But it cost them a lot of money, it cost them a lot of angst, it cost them attorneys, and they couldn't get respect, if you will. But when they brought it to my attention, and I go to the agency and complain with the agency head knowing that they've got to come to me for their funding for the next cycle, then that makes them inclined to listen a little bit more. And that's the feedback that you have, and that's the power that you have as a citizen when you communicate with your representative. And if your representative is responsible, that agency will be responsible. Now, I can't say that we can correct it all, but we can certainly get their attention if we can make sure that they have your ear, that you have their ear.
Well, I mean, you think it's right that 3 people on the National Labor Board can make decisions that affect everybody in this country? Those 3 people can make those decisions? How's that right? Why are they allowed to?
I mean, you know, we only have 9 justices of the Supreme Court, but once they issue an edict, render a decision, I mean, everybody has got to comply with it. I mean, everybody can't be at the table to make decisions, and some of those policies have to be, that policy making has to be delegated. But the policy making and the law itself is supposed to be from the legislative branch, which is the Congress. The regulatory agencies are supposed to, agencies which are the executive branch, they're supposed to implement, to execute the policies that the legislative branch has made. Now, in their implementation, if they take it too far or don't take it far enough, then it's our job to say, hey, you're not doing that the way we intended for it to be done. And if you don't cease and desist, if you don't make changes, we're going to make some changes in your budget, in your purse strings. And so they will, or we will go back and change the law and make it stronger. Or if it's too strong or they're implementing it, then we'll put some restraints on their capacities to do what they're doing that's onerous. But it's got to be that communication, that feedback. And what you have to understand is that it's not always quick. I've got veterans who are awaiting a adjudication on claims, some of which have been in that administrative pipeline for 4 or 5 years. We've got Social Security, disability applications that have been pending and on appeal for 2, 3 years. You know, it's not always quick, but I'm an optimist, and I believe that I think it was Dr. King that says the arc of the universe is long, but it always bends toward justice. You know, it may take a long time, and I guess I have a different respect. Now, let me just close with this little story of patience with the process. I started my legal career as a civil rights lawyer, and one of the first cases that I handled was a case against the Georgia State Prison in Beachville on behalf of inmates, the conditions to which they were subjected. The federal court issued a decision saying that the state needed to correct those conditions, that it violated, that they were, it was cruel and unusual punishment, and that they, but the legislature, the state's response was, it cost $110 million to make those changes, and we don't have the money. So the judge then says to the Attorney General's office, speaking for the state, you need to tell the legislature to appropriate that money, because you got to fix those conditions. And they said, yes, Your Honor, we'll go tell the legislature what you say. And so they went back. 6 months later, we come back, and the judge says, well, what's happened? I said, the legislature still hasn't appropriated the money. So you go back and tell them I say appropriate the money. So 6 months later, they come back. That happens for 4 years. So I've heard that 8 times. And I'm just, you know, here, we've won the case. You know, our clients are entitled to these rights and the improvement of these conditions, but the legislature won't do right. So I get so angry that I said, I'm going to run for the legislature. So I leave the federal judge's office in Brunswick, and I go back to Columbus, Georgia, and I start trying to figure out, well, who's the representative, what seat can I run for? And ultimately, that was like in December, and so by March, I figured out that I was going to run for the legislature, and I ended up running for the legislature. I ended up winning, and so I get to Atlanta. I want to be on the State Institutions and Property Committee, which oversees the prisons, but the Speaker doesn't see fit to put me on that committee. So 6 years pass. The bill comes up to appropriate the money 5 or 6 times. And each time it's pulled out of the appropriations bill. 6 years later, it finally passes. Then the economy goes bad. They build the prisons, but they can't staff them. They can't hire the personnel. They can't equip them, put the equipment in there. So they just sit there for a while. Next thing I know, it's 16 years later. I'm in Congress. The economy gets a little bit better. They get the money to staff and to equip those prisons. My first term in Congress, they opened the new prisons to relieve the overcrowding all across the state. 3 of them are in my congressional district. I get to come to the ribbon cutting, invited by the Commissioner of Corrections, who happened to have been the Commissioner of Corrections when the lawsuit was first filed and litigated almost 20 years before. And he invites me to the podium to speak. And he says, we're happy to have Congressman Bishop here to bring greetings. This facility is in this district. It employs X number of people. It will contribute X number of dollars to the local economy. And we're happy to have him here. But what you should know is that we're really here because of what he did in his other life. But, you know, it took that long. for it to actually come to fruition. And that was, I guess, a lesson in perseverance for me through this political process. Because I always got in it because I wanted to use it to improve people's lives. Because the legal system is too slow. And that's why I do what I do. Because I want to use the political process to improve the quality of life of people, to make the government really be user-friendly and off by and for people. Thank you so much for having me. And,